Last time on Fragmented Poe. And that's where I had a little happy accident and I started exploring this thing as a seaplane. First stage, at least, on this thing will eventually be made to be reusable. I think it's going to make sense to go to Werner engines. I ended up tumbling end over end. Welcome back for another Kerbal Space Program adventure. This episode is Piggyback Station. So there's a few problems with this orbiter. Firstly, the wimpy thrusters, the monopropellant thrusters, just can't push it around, and they're not really positioned well around the center of mass. Also, I flip out on reentry, so I probably need to move my center of lift back. And now it just becomes which one are we going to tackle first? And I'm going to tackle the thruster issue because I really want to get some more modules connected to my space station. I'm currently delivering the solar module after swapping all the thrusters for liquid thrusters for the Werner engines, but I didn't really take the time and care to position them around the center of mass, which was a huge mistake, and it made this a chore. It was really janky how I finally got them to dock together, but I did dock them. So what did we learn? We learned that the Werner engines are the way to go with big spaceships. And we also learned you got to pay attention to where the center of mass is, because this was stupid hard to dock, so I'm going to have to fix that on the next version. So I don't know why it always has to be at night, but on the dark side of Kerbin, here I am docking the second set of solar panels. And I was able to control it so much better with the thrusters correctly placed. Basically a cluster of 4 on the wings around like the cabin. It was so much easier to control that I even flew around and decided to dock the crew cabin so that everybody on the station and the crew of the orbiter could all hang out. Well, after spending a bit of time, I got my Kerbals back on the orbiter, and it's time to return to Kerbin. And that's when I remembered that I didn't adjust the center of lift at all. And so I'm still having that flipping end over end problem. So I need to address that immediately. This time I didn't need to use the escape pod, but I also didn't really regain control. I was saved by the gelatinous oceans of Kerbin. Which I'd be okay if they didn't change, by the way. That's kind of poetic that on the training planet it'd be kind of forgiving. But I imagine that it's a glitch with buoyancy just being brand new in the game. So first order of business was moving the center of lift further back. So I basically just drug the wings further back. And I actually created a lot of work for myself because not only do I have to do all the flight tests again and landing tests again, but it also meant I had to move all the thrusters around. So the next flight will be a test of that. But I'm pretty confident because I kept them comparable in placement. I'm pretty confident that'll work just fine. So now that the orbiter's ready to flight test, I decided to go ahead and make the booster reusable. Essentially, how I built this vehicle is I took my existing proven working booster and then I just copied the wings of the orbiter, slapped them down there, enlarged them a little bit, adjusted some things to get the center of mass in the right spot. Uh, I threw a cockpit on the side of it because I want people to be able to fly it. Turns out that it's not a very good airplane, and I'm sure I could make it a good airplane, but it's already a good booster, and that's what it really needs to be good at. So I decided to trim off some jet engines. It doesn't really need 4 in the final design. One of the key decisions I had to make was I going to get rid of the taxi stage, like the inner stage, for space operations, and I decided to leave it disposable as part of the design because that gives me a lot of flexibility to swap it out later with maybe a nuclear stage. So I attached a decoupler to the nose of this airplane and then I just offset it a bit to cover the nose cone, just what seemed realistic. And as it already is, the nose of that booster airplane tucks all the way up into the engine nozzle of that second stage. So I think it's as realistic as it could be, and that's just how it would have to be, and it's reinforced with a bunch of struts. I do really like it though. It's quite Kerbal. I'm super excited for the day when they add in multiplayer. I know it's all the way at the end of the roadmap, but this kind of vehicle would be so fun if your friend could fly one of the vehicles and you could fly the other one, and you could decide who was controlling it, and then, when you split up, you could actually fly both missions, landing the vehicle and flying the orbiter. But as it is, I'm just playing sandbox, and so I still just play pretend, and I'll quick save and fly the other one. For this flight, though, I'm prototyping the booster, so I'm going to fly that one. I'm just going to get the orbiter out of my way. Flight test went really well. With this particular flight, It didn't actually get high enough up that the reentry effects happened or I really experienced any heating. With other flights of this booster in the future, though, I have seen that, so I must just have not been flying optimally. And I found that this launch vehicle, the combined stack, flies a lot better tipped over on its back. For intents of the mission, it's passed all my testing. This is all ready for an official flight. I mean, every flight is a flight test, right? But this one, supposedly both these vehicles are completely done. I really enjoy the painting gimmick and how you can colorize everything. For the orbiter, I went with kind of a space shuttle had a baby with the orange fuel tank, and for the booster, I went kind of with the like a Planet Express look. Too much fun. Delivering larger and larger payloads to the space station, I'm finding that I usually have to ditch the transit stage, and it burns up in the atmosphere. And I'm pretty okay with that. I'm definitely going to have to rethink the design of the launch vehicle at some point, because if I'm going to be ditching a stage in the atmosphere to burn it up anyway, or leaving it stranded in orbit, I might as well just incorporate that mass into one of the two vehicles. Once the orbiter's in space, I'll quick save and then load back to the separation, and then I'll fly that mission and try to land the booster. In this case, I'm going to land in the ocean. There's nothing I can really do about it. So I'm going to test this as a seaplane, which I expect it to work because buoyancy in this game is very forgiving. The other thing you can't miss is that I had the fuel window open, and I was mostly plotting fuel tanks near the front and back with the thought that I could balance it out if my center of mass was messed up, which I actually didn't need to adjust, and it flew really well. Soared like a bird, a very heavy, not very sorry bird, but enough that it was able to be controllable. Well, mostly controllable. Don't forget to be grateful for the gelatin ocean, while it's here at least. I'd say a good first flight of the booster. It's going to need to be made larger, bigger wings, probably put back on some more jet engines, and make it able to achieve its own liftoffs. But a good first flight, and it does work as a concept, and I am loving the removal of noodle rockets. There's no way I would have been able to build this in the last version of KSP2, and even in KSP1, building a vehicle like this would have been more of a challenge in my opinion. So, pretty rad. I'm digging it. Let's not forget the orbiter. We've still got to deliver our payload, which is a HAB module for the space station. But I figured might as well do a spacewalk, and I'm testing out these magnetic boots. That's a really fun idea. That's too cool. Hey, that really improves the habitable space of the spaceship, right? I need to get away from the crew, so I'm just going to go hang out on the wing. Check out the scenery. Dude. I don't know, magnetic boots just makes me think. I'm glad there's no Borg out here. Is that just me? Rendezvousing with the station. Rendezvous are almost therapeutic when all the tools are working correctly and things are going well. A repeating operation of getting as close as possible, slowing down, matching velocities. The key to new players is to know that you can click the little yellow number that's off to the left of the nav ball, and you can cycle between things like orbit and target. Because if you know all the stuff on that nav ball relative to your target, it makes all this stuff so much easier, and I appreciate that it's there. It's not very clear what you can click, and I think their objective is to make everything in that nav ball area clickable so that you try to click everything. And if that's the case, they're pretty much almost there. Uh, anyway, nav ball rant aside, the objective here is that I turn on my thrusters with R, and then I use I, J, K, and L, the second set of arrow keys, and I just move the prograde and retrograde indicator around on that nav ball. It almost becomes a 2D game at this point, and so you have to alternate between using holding down the right mouse button and panning around and making sure in 3D space everything looks accurate. And then you have to go back to the nav ball and check all your references there. So we've delivered our payload, dropping off the hab here. Figure I'll swing around and dock and hang out with everybody for a while. Might as well while we're here. We can drop off some supplies and maybe some entertainment, some new movies or something like that. The better thrusters positioned well around the center of mass makes this thing actually a joy to float around the station with. And the only challenging thing is, much like the space shuttle, it's freaking huge by comparison to the already huge space station. So you got to be careful about what angle you bring it into what docking port, and it all has to be very thought out. And this wasn't very thought out. And it turned out in my case that the dual vertical stabilizers at the end of the wings were a benefit here because I don't have to worry about the tail getting in the way of a module. In the future, I mean, when I dock more modules to the sides of that thing. Now that I've completed my mission, we've spent some time with the crew, delivered them tons of new accessible living space. Now I have to test the last part of this video and this mission, which is the orbiter any better at reentry that I can actually land it properly? Even if it's a sea landing, I'm okay with that, but just can it be controllable through the reentry process? Fingers crossed. I remembered I had to go back through all my different flight surfaces and crank back up the authority limiter. I turn it off because I don't like the way all the wings like flap around and all the control surfaces flap around when you're in space, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't really hurt anything, but it's wasting electricity in my mind, so I have to turn them off. But good thing I remembered to turn them on because I'm going to need them. And I'm getting quite a bit of heat buildup here on reentry, especially on the forward canards, but nothing unmanageable. We're picking up quite a bit of heat. So far I'm maintaining control though, it's looking good. A little bit of wanting to pitch up, but that's to be expected. I am coming in through the atmosphere, and I'm in total control. Yeah, I kind of let off for a second, see what it would do, and yeah, it will pitch up without my input. So I am manually, but only through use of those forward canards, controlling the nose and forcing the nose down. I'd say that was a pretty good success. Yeah, that totally checks off what I was trying to do with it. Controllable reentry, and I've even managed to switch to jet mode, and I am flying my way to the Space Center if I can. I've still got quite a bit of fuel left, looking good. I suppose that is one thing from KSP1 that I still am having trouble getting used to, there not being just a fuel meter up in the upper right. Maybe that'll come back at some point, or there'll be like widgets for the different apps down there in the toolbar, like the Kerbal Manager and Fuel Manager. Maybe you'll be able to like pin them up there somehow. But I did make it all the way back to the Space Center, so we're coming in for a landing. The orbiter is perfection now. I don't think I'm going to change anything else about it. Kind of funny bug with the landing gear, getting all confused which way the ground is, but they operated normally, so I'm counting that as a successful flight of the orbiter. I'm not going to change anything else. The orbiter's done. The booster is going to be the next thing that needs a few tweaks. I'm extremely impressed with this vehicle. The combined stack, great first flight for the first stage rebuild, and definitely one of the optimal configurations for the orbiter itself. I can't wait to fly another mission with this thing. The docking was a joy. The thrusters were all calibrated correctly, positioned correctly around the center of mass, so it was really easy with the instruments to achieve everything I needed. The plane itself flies great as an aircraft under jet power, so that was really satisfying. And of course, re-entry being controllable and survivable and not a headache. I had to keep holding down W and keeping an eye on the situation, but very controllable. I could do it again. I can't wait to do it again. And yeah, so next time I guess we'll just be working on the booster, and next time I'd like to conquer some kind of a roving vehicle. Hopefully one I can fit in this airplane, but that's a tall order because it's pretty small. Hope you enjoyed the fast turnaround on the videos here. The last one was just a couple weeks ago. I'm shooting for about a video a month if I can. And just thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe if you're not. And a like is always appreciated.